There is a coin in the lining of my boot, not Ottoman, not minted in any city that still stands by its original name. A Byzantine hyperpyron, gold worn thin at the face of the emperor stamped on it, the name of a man who has been dead for 200 years. I found it in the mud outside Adern the year I was conscripted, when I was 11 years old, and still believed that finding gold was a sign from God. I have carried it for 19 years. I do not know what it means anymore. I know only that it is there, under my left foot, and that I check for it every morning the way a man checks for his own heartbeat. This morning, I checked for it before the sun came up. This morning is the 53rd day. The First Ortas have been camped before these walls since the 6th of April. 53 days. I have watched the bombardment work the way a man watches a tooth being pulled. Slowly. Wrongly. The extraction taking longer than the pain can justify. Mehmed's engineers positioned the great bombard, the one they call the Basilica, cast by the Hungarian urban at 68 inches of mouth. In the first week, it fired 7 times a day, and the sound of it moved through the earth before it reached the air. The stone balls weighed 1,200 pounds. I know this because I helped carry one. I know the weight of a 1,200-pound stone ball, not as a number, but as a thing that changes what you think your body is capable of surviving. The walls did not come down the way the engineers promised. They cracked. They shifted. They leaked rubble into the moat, and the rubble had to be dug out by the defenders and replaced with timber and barrels of earth. The rubble was dug out and replaced, and we fired again, and the walls cracked again, and it went on for 53 days. A siege is not a battle. A siege is an argument. The walls were losing the argument. But walls do not concede. They fail. I knew, by the 30th day, that when they finally failed, it would not be gradual. It would be a door, opening all at once. My name is in the muster roll of the First Orta of the Janissary Corps, under the command of Aga Kurtoglu. I am not Kurtoglu's man in the way that a Western knight is his lord's man. I am the port's man. I was given to the port at 11 through the Devshirme. My father was a Greek Christian farmer outside Plovdiv. He did not resist. He had 3 younger sons and not enough land for one. I think he believed he was giving me a better life. He was not wrong. He was also not entirely right. I have never returned to Plovdiv. I no longer know which language I dream in. What I know is the drill, the pace of the march, 120 steps to the minute on flat ground, 90 in mud. The loading sequence of the composite bow I carried for 8 years before the Corps began issuing handguns, the 18 seconds between firing and readiness, assuming dry powder, a competent touch hole, and no wind. The angle at which a man's knees go wrong when a projectile takes him in the hip rather than the chest. The sound a formation makes when it is beginning to break, which is not a sound of voices but a sound of feet, a change in the rhythm of the march that you feel in your own legs before you hear it. I have been in 7 engagements. I have never broken. I did not know, on the morning of the 53rd day, whether that was because I was brave or because I had not yet been tested at the correct pressure. The order came down through the ranks at what I estimate was the 2nd hour before sunrise. Not the order to advance, the order to prepare. There is a difference, and every man in the Orta understood it. Prepare means the engineers have told the Aga that the breach is viable. Viable means a man can enter it. Viable does not mean a man can survive entering it. The Byzantines had spent the night before packing the breach with whatever they had. Timber, rope, barrels, corpses of horses and men, anything that would slow a body trying to come through. We would come through anyway. I checked the coin. I ate nothing. Eating before a breach assault is not wisdom. I checked my killage, the curved sabre at my left hip, 28 inches of blade, Damascene steel purchased with 2 years of campaign pay in a market in Bursa. I checked the handgun, a 60mm wrought iron barrel, primed, touch hole cleared, match cord lit and coiled at my wrist. I checked the killage again. The handgun would fire once. After that, it was weight in my hands until I had time to reload, which I would not have. The man beside me was named Davud. He had been beside me for 4 years. He was from somewhere near Salonika. He had a wife and a child he had not seen in 14 months. He did not speak about them, which meant he thought about them constantly. He checked his handgun. He looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us said anything. We had learned, by this point in our service, that the things worth saying before a breach cannot be said. The things that can be said are not worth the breath. The drums started at what I believe was 1 hour before sunrise. Not the battle drums. The meta, the full corps ensemble, the great kettle drums on horseback, the zurnas, the cymbals. Mehmed had ordered the full meta as a signal to the defenders that this was not another probe. This was the assault. He wanted the men inside those walls to know it. He wanted them to count the drums and understand what the number meant. I heard them and felt them differently from the men around me. Most of the Orta straightened when the meta began. Some of them closed their eyes. I have always believed the drums were not for us. We did not need the drums. We knew what we were doing. The drums were for the men on the walls. The drums were a message to men who had been awake for 53 nights, wondering when this moment would come. Now they knew. The wondering was over. That is sometimes worse. The first assault wave was the Anatolian irregulars, the Bashi bazooks. Mehmed used them first, because they were expendable and numerous, and because their dying wore down the defenders before the Kapikalu came forward. This is the calculation that no one in the history books writes plainly. The irregulars died to tire the Byzantine arms. The defenders stabbed and hacked and pushed and shot for 2 hours at the irregulars, and when the irregulars finally broke, not from cowardice, from arithmetic, from the simple subtraction of men until the remainder could not sustain the line, the Anatolian regulars from Ishak Pasha's division went in. I stood in formation through all of it. This is what people do not understand about a siege assault. The waiting, in formation, within earshot of what is happening at the walls, is its own kind of pressure. You hear it. You cannot see it. You hear the quality of the fighting change as the assault waves cycle through. You hear when a push succeeds and when it fails. You hear specific sounds that you have learned, over years of this work, to read as precisely as a physician reads a pulse. A roar that builds and sustains means a held line. A roar that peaks and then fragmentates into individual voices means a broken line, which means retreat, which means the next wave goes in. I counted. 2 waves in. The Anatolians were taking the breach from the irregulars' position. They were inside the outer wall at the section called the Blackeneye. I knew the geography of these walls the way I know the streets of Edirne. We had studied the models. We had walked the exterior. We knew where the Theodosian walls were thickest, where the moat was deepest, where the towers were positioned, where the bombard urban had concentrated its fire, and where the breach was widest. The breach was widest at the section the Byzantines called the Pempton Gate. 60 feet of wall collapsed inward. The gap at its widest was 30 feet. 30 feet is not much. 30 feet is enough for 3 men abreast. 3 men abreast is enough to take a city if they do not stop. The Anatolians began to fail at what I estimate was 2 hours into the general assault. I did not see it happen. I heard it. The quality of the sound from the walls changed again. Not a collapse, but a softening. The kind of noise a line makes when it is still holding, but holding by habit rather than by will. I'd heard that sound before. At Kosovo. At the second engagement outside Varna, it is the sound of men who are still fighting because they cannot find the moment to stop. The moment to stop is a real thing. It exists in every engagement. A man knows it when he feels it. When the Anatolians found it, the Kapikalu went forward. The Aga's voice. The drums accelerating. Davud at my left shoulder. The coin under my boot. The breach was larger than I had expected from the exterior. I had imagined 30 feet of gap. What I entered was a throat. Rubble piled 10 feet high on either side. The ancient stone of the Theodosian wall fractured and compressed into a passage perhaps 12 feet wide at its narrowest. Opening into a space beyond that I could not see because the smoke from the handguns and Greek fire and the bodies burning in the passage itself created a wall of its own. A wall of obscured air. What I knew of what lay beyond the breach I knew from maps and models, not from sight. I came through the breach at a run. This is not bravery. Running through a breach is the correct tactical decision because a man who walks through a breach gives the defender time to place the next blow. Running means the blow, if it comes, will glance rather than land square. Running means the man behind you is 2 seconds closer to the position you just cleared. Running means the breach does not become a choke point where men stack behind each other and die against the bottleneck. I ran. The handgun in my left hand, the killage drawn in my right. The first defender I encountered in the breach passage was a Genoese crossbowman from the Giustiniani companies. I know this because his livery was red and white, the colours of Genoa. The crossbow he was trying to reload was a Genoese style I recognised from the engagement at Varna, where we had faced them from the other direction. He was working the windlass when I came through the smoke. He had perhaps 3 seconds before his bolt was seated. He had perhaps 4 seconds to bring it up and aim. I gave him neither. I do not remember the next moment clearly. I remember the killage. I remember the angle. I remember the sound his crossbow made when it hit the rubble, which was different from the sound a weapon makes when it is dropped deliberately. A weapon dropped deliberately makes no protest. A weapon dropped involuntarily makes a protest. I kept moving. What I saw in the first 10 minutes inside the wall. Not a battle. A collapse. The Byzantines had known for days, perhaps weeks, that this moment was coming. Their emperor, Constantine XI, had spent the night making speeches. He had gone to every section of the wall. He had spoken to every captain. I know this because it is what a man does when he knows the morning will be the last morning, and he is still, despite everything, a man who believes that words do something. The speeches are in the record. The speeches are very good. They did not change the arithmetic. Inside the wall, the arithmetic was visible. The Byzantine garrison was not a garrison in any meaningful sense by the time I entered. It was 7,000 men defending 14 miles of wall, and not all 7,000 were soldiers, and not all the soldiers were armed with weapons suited to what was happening. I saw men with hunting bows. I saw men with agricultural tools. I saw a priest in vestments at the corner of what I believe was the Blakerne Palace precinct, standing very still, which is what a man does when he has no weapon and no way out, and has decided that stillness is its own kind of answer. I did not kill the priest. I do not know why. I had orders that were not gentle. The first hours inside the wall were not gentle. I have thought about the priest for 30 years, and I cannot tell you why I moved past him without raising the killage. I can tell you that he did not flinch. That is the only detail I remember with certainty. He did not flinch. The city inside the wall was not what the maps showed. The maps showed streets. The streets existed, but the streets were also something else. They were the answer to a question the maps did not ask, which was what happens to a city after 53 days of bombardment inside the walls, after years of economic collapse before the bombardment, after the memory of the first sack in 1204 that broke something in the city's relationship with its own continuity. The streets were intact, but they were not inhabited the way a city's streets should be inhabited. The people had been moved to the interior, the churches. The men had been moved to the walls. 40 years in service, and I have learned that the most honest thing a soldier sees is not the enemy. It is the civilian. The enemy is performing. The civilian has forgotten to perform because no one told him today was the day they needed to perform. Inside the wall, the civilians I saw were not performing. They were simply present, faces at windows. A woman in a courtyard who did not run when I came through the gate. An old man seated on the steps of a church, his hands on his knees, watching me the way a man watches weather, as something that is happening to him, not something he has any relationship to stopping. I was 29 years old. I had been trained for this since I was 11. I had never trained for the old man on the steps. The coin is still in my boot. Not the lining. The lining wore through somewhere in the Balkans 3 campaigns ago. Now I keep it against my skin, between the leather and the sole, where I can feel the edge of it with the ball of my foot when I press down. It reminds me of pressure, not of gold, not of the dead emperor's face. Of pressure. The reward came in the distribution 3 days after the city fell. My name is in the list. Yusuf al-Rashid, First Orta, Janissary Corps. The amount is recorded. 27 gold pieces. 27 gold pieces for 19 years of service, for 7 engagements, for the breach at the Pempton Gate, for the 10 minutes inside the wall that the historian did not follow me into. I did not complain. Davud was not in the list. Davud was in the passage. They are calling it the conquest. Al-Fatah, the opening. Mehmed will be called Fatih, the conqueror, and the name will outlast everything I have known. The mosques will be built over the churches, and the churches will be renamed, and the hippodrome will still be the hippodrome, because stone is harder to rename than paper. The city is very beautiful. I had not expected it to be beautiful inside. The maps were correct about the streets and wrong about the light. The light inside Constantinople in late May, in the morning, when the smoke from the bombardment has thinned enough to let it through, is a particular quality of gold that I have not seen in any other city. It comes off the water in the Golden Horn. It comes through the dome of the great church before anyone had decided what to do with the great church. It comes through smoke. I am standing in a street I do not know the name of. The priest is behind me somewhere. Davud is in the breach. The hyperpyron is under my boot. The city is open. The light is gold.